Hi, I am Dr. Andrea Goeglein, and I have the supreme pleasure today to join me on Serving Your Success, an author, an incredible positive psychology expert, Caroline Miller. And if you remember, in one of our other episodes, I actually featured her book when we were talking about visualization. So, welcome. What I would love for you to do, to talk to, just for a moment, the audience, those things about yourself in the field of positive psychology, the new subject you're working in, grit, and how you impact, like why the work, who you are. I prefer to have you tell everyone that about you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I am fascinated and enthralled by the positive psychology world. I'm one of the first 34 people in the world to get a master's degree. I was very fortunate to be tutored by Dr. Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson, who's passed on very unfortunately. But I became fascinated by the science of goal setting in 2005. I didn't know there was a science to it. I'd always been a goal setting expert, and I thought somebody who worked with people in the field of goal setting and as a coach. And then I found out that there was this thing called goal setting theory, which I'd never heard of. And my capstone project from that year, 2005-2006, became this bestseller, Creating Your Best Life. And to this day, I'm still surprised that it was the first mass market book that had facts and footnotes in it on the science of goal setting. And I am the first to connect the science of happiness with the science of goal setting.
Correct.
So I got fascinated by grit because Angela Duckworth was doing her PhD work, and I heard she was doing this thing called grit.
Before we go on to there, because there is another part of her story that she didn't share that brought you into my life. Okay, so you went through the master's program. I went through that 6-month training program telephonically, where they were actually over a 2-year, 3-year period developing what that coursework would be, and which was phenomenal. But when your work first came out, when this book, because I had always worked in the science of whatever, any aspect of motivation, yours was specifically goal setting, so I love that you had those footnotes.
Thank you.
And you had owned businesses, you had won and lost in the real world. And we know how much the application of this work is important. And so that was the part of your story, how you had shown this progression, and then at a point when your life successes or challenges met up with the science of positive psychology, it blossomed into this incredible body of work. And I just wanted to compliment you. Like, that path is not dissimilar to what I'd done, and it was so intriguing to me because you had been doing such good work. You had taken huge risks, which will lead us into the conversation about grit, huge risks in business, had life challenges, had the opportunity to go into this master's program, and how you have evolved such an incredible body of work now. So now take us into your TEDx talk and grit.
Well, what I want to say is that's one of the most thoughtful introductions of who I am and what I do, and I really appreciate that because you got all the nuances of who I am and why I'm different. So I really thank you for that. So yes, I had some real failures. My eating disorder, I was the first person to ever overcome bulimia and live to tell about it, which is so surprising. But back in the 1980s, all anyone knew is that people died. And so there was no hope. And I clawed my way back to life, and I said to myself, if I really ever get better and stay better, I want to tell the world that hope is out there. So that book, My Name is Caroline, really broke new ground. Came out in 1988, and in many ways is the foundation for everything I've done since then. So it's the thing I'm proudest of, and I have no shame associated with it.
And I want to remind you of an association even with that. I have a very dear friend, Dr. Courtney Warren, who has been on this show, and when she had also done a TED Talk, as you have, but her entire background was in eating disorders. And so when your story came to me, I already had her in my life, and I had understood where and how unique back in the 80s that you would actually
Yes.
survive as healthy as you did.
You know so much that
I pay
people don't know.
attention.
You do
I
pay
pay
attention.
attention.
It's in the details. It is in the details.
Yes.
And I just remember being, growing up in Washington, D.C. and privileged, school background and competitive swimmer. And what I had was success. What I didn't have was joy, and I didn't have grit.
Yeah.
And so, ironically, it was the bottoming out in 1984, thinking, marriage is going to, get rid of this eating disorder and make me happier. I thought getting into Harvard would make me happy. I got there, it was like, a lot of people here are really unhappy.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, be careful what you and
Yes.
be careful what you work towards. So now I know it's called
Exactly.
stupid grit.
Exactly.
Really stupid grit.
Yes.
So anyway, but I met my husband there, and we're about to celebrate 34 years of marriage with 3 great kids. So some things work out. But to make a long story short, it was bottoming out, being suicidal,
Right.
having no hope, no way, no path to recovery, that actually was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it's in these dark moments and it's in these failures that I think you find out who you are, you find out what you're made of, and you have to develop a purpose in life. And my purpose at first was figuring out how to be alive.
Okay, so I want you to pause for 1 second because, as you know, in my Don't Die series, one of the many adages is experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, and you teach what you need to learn. This is what it looks like. You have evolved that experience up until that point. Now, take us into the grid.
So, interestingly enough, the holy grail in the 1980s was getting into recovery.
Correct.
So it was like a bomb going off in my life. The New York Times Sunday Book Review reviewed My Name is Caroline. I was like, who would want to read this disgusting book? Well, by the way,
was not
lots of
disgusting.
people
Lots
wanted
of
to read
people.
it. It's still
Yes.
being sold. And actually, I have the first book about staying in recovery, which turned out to be the harder thing.
Exactly.
So Positively Caroline, 30
Correct.
years of recovery. There's hope that you can stay in recovery. So anyway, what I realized as I got into the positive psychology program and began to unpack, I'm sitting at the University of Pennsylvania listening to theories on self-efficacy theory, goal-setting theory, social contagion, all of these psychological theories. And I've got
Many words I don't share with you.
well, two tracks
Yes.
going in my brain. Part of it was, oh my gosh, this explains how I got better and stayed better. This is it. I discovered purpose, meaning. I had a hard goal I overcame. I used priming.
And you had love in your life, as you just mentioned.
I had love
You
in my
had
life.
yes, because I
And,
remembered some of the stories of your children.
Yeah.
Yep. This.
I did, and I discovered who I was.
Right.
And in the process, I realized that part of my purpose in life is to help other people set and accomplish big goals and take risks, live without regret,
Right.
and have your best life. So creating your best life is where I inserted this chapter on this new thing called grit. By the way,
Right.
Angela Duckworth said to me at some point after this book, hey, Caroline, I'm never going to write a book about grit. I love how you write. You go write a book about grit.
No.
Then Angela gets, I think, the largest advance in the history of psychology, writes a book about grit. Every publisher in the world turns down my next book, Getting Grit. I start to send my rejection letters to Angela saying, if I didn't like you, this could be a problem.
Wow.
And I said, but
I
you
didn't
know
know
what?
that part of the
Yeah.
story.
And even Marty Seligman said to me about a year ago, don't bother, Caroline, I've read her book. It's great. So, bottom line is, I wrote a very different book from Angela, and
Right.
suddenly, Sounds True had a book drop out of their spring 2017 catalog. They heard that I had been writing this book,
Right.
and they said, hey, can we see it? Next thing I know, I had this great deal. The book's coming out. It's already been named one of the 10 books that'll change your life this year.
Well, perfect. So let me tell you how you can get the first free chapter and introduction. You have to go to Caroline's website, Caroline Miller, CarolineMiller.com, and you'll get to immediately download the introduction and the first chapter. And I will tell you, for those who follow my Serving Your Success series, normally Kate, my in-house millennial, is with me. There is a great part in the introduction where you speak about your son and him getting his first major job in an accounting firm,
Right.
and that what people are looking for.
What they're looking for.
And that
grit.
was, you betcha.
Thank you. So, my children have given me permission
Yes.
to put their stories in places throughout the book. But
Okay.
I became, first of all, I realized that what got me better and kept me better was this quality called grit. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't have it. I had success. I had the bumper sticker.
Yep.
I had the resume virtues, as David Brooks
Correct.
would say.
Yes.
I didn't have the legacy virtues.
Yes.
And so what I started to do was put together what are the character strengths that undergird grit. So this is where my book really diverges from Angela Duckworth's
Right, so
book.
talk to me, because
Okay.
I remembered when I first heard about grit, I was saying, well, wait a minute, how is that different than perseverance? How is
Right.
that different
Right.
than resilience? Like, what is that? Isn't
Right.
this just a part of that? And in the few sentences that I've read so far in the chapter, you had really succinct statements where, oh, it is not, this is the extension, this is
Yeah.
what it really
Yeah.
looks like. So talk to us about that.
Well, so Angela's book, Grit, I brought
Which is
it.
pretty academic, is it not?
It's readable.
It's readable,
It's
yes.
done very well. But she really goes into why did she study it and what has she discovered.
Okay.
So where Angela was always supportive of my book, and where
Yes.
I really have made, I think, groundbreaking strides, is in how do you cultivate it? Because I work with people. Not
How
only
do you
did
cultivate it? The
how do you
application.
cultivate
This
Right.
is the part that matters to you, so listen up.
So I'm a real person
Yes.
who had to cultivate it, and that was when I realized anybody can do this.
Correct.
Anybody can do this. Now, some people start with a hardwired advantage. Some people are more impulsive or less
Absolutely.
impulsive.
Absolutely.
You know, half of happiness is hardwired, and yet we discovered through positive psychology that half of it is also learnable behavior,
You betcha.
mindset. And so half of grit is hardwired, is what
Yep.
we think, and the other half is learnable. So what I did was I unpacked what did I have to do to get grittier, but also in these at least 1,000 people I've worked with as a coach, they all come in wanting to be grittier. They all come in with big goals they want to accomplish that they haven't been able to achieve
So,
on their own.
do you have a definition of grit?
I have a different definition from
Okay.
Angela. So Angela is passion and perseverance in pursuit of long-term goals.
Okay.
I have something I call authentic grit, because what I realized is I
Remember
don't
that.
think grit is good unless it inspires other people to be their best selves and take positive risks to live their best lives. So my authentic grit definition is really about not just creating your own best life through taking hard works, having, hard goals, being passionate in the pursuit of them,
Okay.
but those goals and that behavior has to inspire other people to be better too. Now what this does is it eliminates the issues around Adolf Hitler.
Correct.
Now he has the classic definition of grit.
Correct.
And so in my book, I have good grit and bad grit. And so what I talk about is I believe this quality of authentic grit is really what we're striving for. And I think good grit includes examples of that, such as, let's just say, Mount Rushmore grit. Those are people who stand at the turning point
You
of
betcha.
history.
You betcha.
Their actions, their standing up for the best in the world against the worst in humans has changed history. So you think about Martin Luther King, you think about Harriet Tubman, you think about Mother Teresa, you think about Malala Yousafzai.
Yes.
These people have stood at the turning point of history.
Absolutely.
And then there's celebrity grit. There's J.K. Rowling, who's used her celebrity
Yep.
to really save reading is how the Wall
Right.
Street Journal described it. And then there's also something called ordinary grit. And ordinary grit are people who do extraordinary things in ordinary circumstances.
Correct.
We also have what I think a lot of people would think of as the Katie Ledeckis of the world, the Michael Phelps of the world.
Sure.
People with what I call Mount Olympus grit.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't have wanted to write a book unless I knew you could cultivate it. So that's where ordinary grit comes in.
And just pause me for a moment. I'm hearing from our mutual training, whereas in authentic happiness we had the pleasant life, the good life, the meaningful life.
Right.
Where authentic grit truly appears to reside is in that same space of meaningful life where you in fact have integrated, as Chris Peterson would say, people matter, where other people
matter. That's a great
become-
observation. So Marty, and I think it's a generally accepted definition, is that the well-lived life has gone beyond the definition of authentic happiness.
Absolutely.
It's perma. So it's
Yes.
positive moments.
Right.
It's positive emotions,
Correct.
it's relationships, it's meaning, and I think achievement is that big controversial A in PERMA,
Right.
which is something that was Marty was really wrestling with my year at MAP.
Okay.
But I'm a big believer in this because we don't just achieve things to get a trophy. That's
Correct.
the big mistake that's
Correct.
been made with the millennials. People feel better at the end of the day if they've moved the needle on the things that matter to them. So achievement is not just about trophies. It's not just about Olympic gold medals. It's about pursuing the things that are meaningful to you, that make you live without regrets, and take risks to achieve those goals. So that's where grit resides. I think grit resides in achievement. It does reside in meaning. You're absolutely right. It also, is in the positive moments, certainly the positive emotions,
Correct.
and then relationships. Because what's interesting about gritty goals is that they're so hard and so long term that you can't do them alone.
Right.
So you have to build bridges to other people. So one of the things I learned in my recovery from my eating disorder is a really important phrase. You can't keep what you don't give away.
That's
You
great.
can't keep what you don't give away.
That's beautiful.
And so that's also where my definition of authentic grit really matters, is because I don't think it's enough to cultivate it for yourself.
Correct.
I think we've reached this really pivotal moment in our country, if not around the world, where we don't have the resilience that we once had in our
Correct.
population for all kinds of
I agree.
reasons. And I think we all bear some responsibility
I agree.
in turning the Titanic by an inch. So I think this is, to me, one of the most important challenges facing us today is how do we up our standards so that good enough isn't good enough anymore.
Perfect.
Good, excellent, and awesome is not good enough.
Correct.
We need to inspire awe in other people. That's
If you
what
weren't awesome, what would you
is.
be?
Well, right. And
Yeah.
so I really do believe that this is a problem that has infiltrated our schools, our sports teams, our communities, our families, and life in general.
Right. Yeah.
So-
I would say that you are truly speaking to this choir, and particularly the choir that listens to any of the work that I bring out into the world, because that is the main focus of it. How do we take these great theories and actually put them and show what this looks like?
Right.
So that once you see one example,
Yes.
you know that it can be done again.
Yes.
And then how do we take those that are both ahead of us and those that are coming up and that need to push up the whole world?
Yes, so this is very interesting. I'm talking to Angela about the whole idea of grit mentors, and hopefully participating in some of the research in her character lab on this, because one of the reasons I'm alive and one of the reasons I believe in grit so much is one woman at a 12-step meeting in February of 1984 stood up and said this sentence that changed my life. And she said, "My name is Betsy and I'm recovering from bulimia one day at a time." And that was the most seismic
Beautiful.
shock in my life, because I'd never heard all of those words, certainly not all in the same sentence. And she gave me hope.
Correct.
And because she gave me hope, everything changed.
Right.
And that is really what it's about in self-efficacy theory and all these
And
other
I would say that a
theories.
little different. She did not give you hope. At that moment, what I perceived occurred is that you found the hope that was within you that may have been covered up by the symptoms of bulimia.
I'd have to think about that. That's
Yeah.
a very deep thought.
Okay? Because I don't think another person can give you hope, or without you having something in you that can
spark.
Yeah.
Well,
the
yeah.
connection.
There's an interesting word. Is it a Hebrew word, sitzfleisch? It's like developing. I was reading this great profile of not Albert Bandura, Walter Mischel.
Yes.
And Walter Mischel and his grandmother used to tell him he had to have sitzfleisch, which was this second wind, this ability to persevere.
Okay.
And I think when you've got a kernel of that,
Yes.
hope will ignite it into a flame.
Yes. Yes.
But I think that's what you're responsible to give away.
Yeah.
You can't jealously kind of take all the pluses and the joy that comes from somebody else giving you hope. I think you have to turn around and give it to other people, which is the mentoring I
Absolutely.
talk about.
Yes.
And so you and I share a passion for the application of this
Absolutely.
research. Because you know what? I think the reason I wrote the first book to connect the science of goal setting with the science of happiness is not because these theories didn't exist.
I mean, I use it. I use
Yay!
this book. Yeah.
It's a great book. It's
It
a great
is.
book. But we want to take all this stuff that's been stuck in academia and bring it out and say, so what? What do I do with this?
That was Marty's charge. You know, when the non-researchers of the world joined into his program, I already had a doctorate. I had no intentions on joining and doing research. That was not my world.
Right.
But he really charged the lay amongst us.
Yes, he did.
To take this work and go forward.
And
you know, that's why tools like this book, and I'm very interested, you know, because you opened Getting Grit with a story about a millennial. You know, it is hard. You know, our in-house millennials may not be our subject cases because they are going to resemble things about us. You know, they grew up in an environment where this was happening and you were working through all of that. But it is that noticing that what matters no matter what your age.
Well,
And I think that's what you pointed out in that interview piece. You know, this is the quality that we admire and we know helps people. Yes, and helps people get ahead, because when the going gets really ugly, those that have that capacity will stick it out long enough to get it to the better place again versus walk when it's not good.
And so one of the other bad kinds of grit that I talk about is selfie grit. And so the people who just always have to tell you how hard they've worked and the rest of it. But this authentic grit is quiet. It gets your attention. And I think when we know we're in the presence of somebody who has that determination, that passion, they don't have a need to kind of publicize themselves or post pictures of themselves or tell everyone what they're doing or how well they're doing. We gravitate towards those people. I find the waters part for those people. So this is what has been missing in the millennials, not through any fault of their own. We did this to them. We dumbed down playgrounds, all these wood chips, and you know, math made easy, and don't get hurt in these safe rooms and cuddlers. You can hire somebody to hold you when you're sad now. We did this to them. And so
I didn't. I'm not taking blame.
Well, and my kids...
Just ask my daughter. She wishes she had that mother.
Some families have done a very good job.
No, believe me. I more than understand. I observed it. I was a part of it. I clearly had my place in it. I had a different framework from my background. You know, I wasn't given that soft path, and I'm a full 10 years older than you, so I didn't have that same cushion in that way. But I will tell you that it is the things that why grit is so important. Why I think the topic you're working on in your TEDx speech, that it's an easy way to get people into the concept get them
that's a great thought.
To understand this is what it looks like, and no matter how much we take responsibility for where it came, we've got today and how do we move forward. Because one of the things you said, which I listen for, whether someone is telling me about their past when we first meet, or whether they start by telling me what they are building towards in the future.
That's interesting.
And that's just a way, it's just like a way for me to step back and say, okay,
what's the story?
There's something that has to be cleaned up here before we can get to where you want to go next.
And what's the story that you've written? What's the script you've written for your life? And are you living out a script where you're not resilient or gritty? And I really do believe people can rewrite the script of their future.
Absolutely.
And you can change. But you've referenced my son several times, and the book does start. The introduction is about my oldest son, who didn't set the world on fire academically because his passion was always swimming, and so he started at the University of Maryland and then transferred to the University of Cincinnati. And he was captain of the team, and he finished with his best meet ever. He swam 2-a-days throughout all his formative years, working so hard, no sleepovers, no this, no that, just sacrifice.
Very
but
focused.
He loved it, and he was good. And so when he was interviewing at all these accounting firms, it wasn't his GPA. And none of I don't know of any companies that are looking for GPAs. They're looking for character. Monster even has a whole ad series about we'll find you gritty people.
That's right.
So they asked my son all about his swimming, and he got hired because he had demonstrated a work ethic, a passion, an ability to be coached.
Yeah.
And this is what they want. So I've interviewed people for the book. I've gotten the greatest quotes. One guy at this big think tank in Washington said, "We love kids who grew up on family farms because the animals don't care if you're tired and cold and hungry. They have to be fed. They love kids who've, this is another great one, who've done sports where there were no cheerleaders. They love kids who've gone on missions because of the 2 years of constant rejection.
Beautiful.
They love Eagle Scouts. And so anybody out there, you can develop grit, but the companies are looking for this, and if you don't have it, they're going to go look for someone who has it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I want to make sure there isn't anything you want to leave our audience with. Is there anything that you think that you may have missed that you want to make sure we know?
I think the main thing I want people to know is that grit is something you can cultivate. It's something you have to cultivate. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have.
Beautiful.
Because you will never live your best life unless you have grit.
Beautiful.
And so go do hard things and create an environment where you have that support.
Now, I know we can get the first chapter on your website. When do we actually get the book?
Okay, so you can pre-order the book, and pre-orders really matter.
They do.
Really matter.
In this, for all of you business-oriented, this is that thing that helps inventory and actually get people to know that they want your product. So this is a very nice thing to do, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
And so you can pre-order it at Amazon. I think it's going to be translated into a number of languages, but you can do your pre-order at Amazon, and you can get to that off my website, which is CarolineMiller.com. And I really appreciate you shining a light on this right now. I really appreciate it.
Well,
So
thank you for being in Las Vegas. I hope you get to enjoy your keynote tomorrow and enjoy a little bit of our city. I hope the sun does come out for you while you're here. I'm sorry. We have a very
Who's
beautiful
outside?
I know. This is true. Yeah. All the lights are on inside for you. Well, as you know, the things I care the most about serving your success is showing you people, places, and ways where you could actually take the initiative to prove to yourself that you can serve your own success. So I want to thank you for joining me with this episode. Do go to her website and download the chapter, and there will be many more conversations about grit as we go forward. Thank you. And thank you for being with me. Thanks.